Every single time we got a question from a partner that was in the integration process, we took that and created tickets to improve the developer documentation experience so that it really became a self-serve experience. The idea behind PayFac-as-a-Service is that software companies should be able to have all of the benefits of the PayFac model and the modern technology available from folks like Stripe and Adyen, along with the pricing advantages of some of the legacy processors. I definitely lean more in the camp of innovation over regulation. And I think for the most part, private companies are better equipped to understand the boundaries of what's appropriate than regulators are.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Devico Breakfast Bar. Here we speak with different people involved in the business landscape, share their expertise, delve into the latest tech trends, and explore the ins and outs of IT outsourcing. I'm Oleg Sadikov, and today I'm excited to have Caleb Avery, founder and CEO of SaaS. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss new episodes. Hi Caleb, and thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited.
Let's start our podcast with a little blitz. I start a sentence and you continue, okay?
All right.
Entrepreneurship gave me
a lot of headaches.
Entrepreneurship deprived me.
Time with my kids.
My main superpower is
being able to juggle a lot of things all at once.
My main weakness is
the ability to delegate tasks.
When I'm afraid, I
dive into the weeds.
What inspired you the creation of Tiled? Was there a specific problem or gap that you wanted to address?
I've been in payments my entire career. So I started out going door to door, selling payments to small business owners. And what I saw was this shift from the small business owners wanting just a terminal sitting on the counter to wanting actual integrated software that handled payroll, scheduling, invoicing, you name it. And so I started diving deep into that area of the payment space. And so as I was doing angel investing and consulting for these vertical software companies, what I noticed was that the vast majority were using Stripe, and they were just passing along the 2.9% and 30 cents from Stripe onto their merchants. And when I started digging in under the hood and getting to know these founders and these entrepreneurs, they just thought Stripe was easy. 7 lines of code will get up and running on payments. And they didn't realize how much money they were leaving on the table by partnering with Stripe. And so the inspiration behind Tiled was to offer these software companies an option where they could have a Stripe-like technology, but still be able to generate revenue on all of those payments flowing through their platform.
What makes PayFac-as-a-Service a game changed for vertical SaaS companies and marketplaces?
Prior to options like Tiled and PayFac-as-a-Service, software companies were either choosing the technology available from providers like Stripe or the economics available from some of the legacy incumbent processors. And the idea behind PayFac-as-a-Service is that software companies should be able to have all of the benefits of the PayFac model and the modern technology available from folks like Stripe and Adyen, along with the pricing advantages of some of the legacy processors. And so we think about it as like the PayFac holy grail, where you're getting all of the benefits without the downsides.
Was there a specific project or company that first exposed you to the PayFac model and its pain points?
I had a couple of consulting clients all around the same time that were all considering going and becoming registered payment facilitators. And so as a consultant, I was actually working with a number of the companies that became competitors to Tiled to understand their model and understand what it would look like for some of my consulting clients to actually go through the process of becoming a registered payment facilitator themselves. And once I really understood what that meant to go become a fully registered PayFac and negotiate with a bank, negotiate with a processor, go through that registration process, stand up the team, take on all the liabilities. None of the clients that I was working with had any interest in that model. It was a pretty eye-opening experience for me that these software companies were really looking for an alternative option.
You mentioned that once you're averaging a 9-day traction timeline, what steps have you streamlined to get companies onboarded that quickly?
That wasn't where we started from day one, so I'll say that. I think our first
I would be
client,
surprised.
Yeah, you don't get it right out of the gate the first time typically. And so for us, it was, I think, about 6 months to get the first companies onboarded onto the platform, and really a couple of key things that we did to streamline that process. Thing one was really taking a hard look at the API architecture and trying to simplify down that architecture as much as we could. And frankly, we took some inspiration from Stripe. So if you look at Stripe, they have things like payment intents, charges. The Stripe.js, we have things like payment intents, charges, pages and the Tilt.js. And so really trying to streamline down that API architecture. Thing two was really improving the developer documentation. So instead of developers having to come to us and ask questions because certain things weren't documented properly, every single time we got a question from a partner that was in the integration process, we took that and created tickets to improve the developer documentation experience so that it really became a self-serve experience instead of this back and forth, hey, they're writing code and then they get stuck and they have to reach out and ask questions and wait for us. And so now it's realistic for a team of developers to go in, build an integration to Tilt without ever having to ask us a single question. And then thing three, as great as the developer documentation is, we needed to scope down what they were actually building. And for us, that meant creating white labeled components. And so what we saw initially was it was something like 90% of our customers were doing an entire API integration. So they were building their own merchant onboarding, building their own reporting, building their own hosted payment pages. And when we asked them why, it was all about the branding. And so we rebuilt our front end solutions to be able to white label all of those components in a matter of minutes. And when we did that, it went from 90% doing a full API build to now it's something like 80% are using our white labeled components. And so we completely flipped the script there. And so now the vast majority of our clients have dramatically scoped down the actual integration that they're completing to Tilt. And that combination of the better architecture, the better documentation, and then the white label tools has taken us from that 6 months down to a 9-day integration process.
How could you describe PayFac-as-a-Service for those who are not familiar with those terminology in simple words?
Let's imagine that you're building out a point of sale software for a restaurant. Tilt is providing the APIs, the consoles, and the infrastructure so that that restaurant point of sale company can provide payment processing to those restaurants and then generate revenue every single time their restaurants process a payment through their platform.
As both founder and CEO, what does your typical day look like? How do you balance strategic planning and day-to-day operations?
I rarely think that it feels like there's a balance. I think it's more jumping from day to day. What's the big priority of the moment and trying to be intentional about carving out enough time for that strategic planning to happen. But a lot of my day, especially at this point, still ends up being spent in the weeds, whether that's selling to enterprise clients, working through operational issues, people management, you name it. There's never a shortage of things to do day to day. And so for me, the way that I think about it is trying to be intentional, whether that's on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis, to carve out specific time and say, hey, this week or these couple of days, I'm going to be working on the business instead of in the business. And so for me, I have my leadership team fly out to Colorado once a month, typically for 3 to 5 days. And that's really where we're trying to spend more dedicated time working on the business, thinking strategically, zooming ourselves out of the day-to-day. And then a lot of the rest of the time is just in the weeds, fighting fires and trying to get stuff done.
If you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice before starting Tilt, what would it be?
I think one of the more impactful things that I did over the last 6 years was bring on a leadership coach. And so the advice to my younger self would be to do that sooner. Bring on someone that can really help develop me as a leader and develop me as a CEO. And I think we would have moved faster earlier on and been able to make some of those key decisions a little bit faster just by me being better equipped in my role.
What is your advice regarding selecting that coach? How can you choose it within army of coaches, mentors?
Yeah, I think you have to treat it just like you would any other interview process. So if you're going and hiring for a product manager, you're not just going to hire the first resume and the first person that you talk to for that role. And I know I've talked to some other founders and entrepreneurs that they got an introduction from someone that they know and they just signed up immediately with that coach, which seems crazy to me that you're picking this very important person that's going to guide you along the journey. And if you don't have that trust and transparency, then that relationship isn't going to work. I think for me, I knew that we had found the right leadership coach when in the first meeting that we had, he was telling me things that I didn't want to hear. And so I felt uncomfortable in that conversation, whereas I had talked to a number of other leadership coaches prior to that, and the conversations were pretty comfortable in that intro meeting. And the reality is that the point of that person is to push you to be better. And so if you're not uncomfortable in those conversations, are you really growing and learning?
With the growing use of AI in financial services, what's your take on the balance between innovation and regulation?
As an entrepreneur my entire life, I definitely lean more in the camp of innovation over regulation. And I think for the most part, private companies are better equipped to understand the boundaries of what's appropriate than regulators are that for the most part, haven't actually operated in a business day to day. And so I'm very much in the camp of let's let private companies figure out how they're going to use AI to improve their businesses, and we'll let the regulators be as light a touch as possible.
How do you see AI transforming the payments industry over the next few years?
I think for us, we've started to look at each segment of the business, whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, whether it's product, whether it's engineering, ops, support. There's AI applications in almost every area of the business. And we, a couple times a year, do what we call a build week. So we take a week where the entire team takes their focus away from the core roadmap, the core day-to-day, and really thinks about what's the most impactful thing that we could do over the course of this week that could transform the future of Tild. And this past build week, a couple of the projects that we were looking at were AI implementations to really just make the team more efficient in their day-to-day activities. And for us, one of the projects that we worked on was being able to have our own support team use an AI chat tool that would search across all of our FAQs, developer documentations, Google Drives, any content that we've put out on the product over the years. And so instead of just asking our product managers questions, they're going and asking this AI tool. And we've been blown away by how helpful that's been for the team to have these high quality responses based on our own incredible documentation, where non-technical team members have been able to go answer technical questions to some of our customers using this tool.
How do you see the role of IT outsourcing evolving in the context of your industry's future needs?
I think for our business especially, one of the things that we are seeing is an immense amount of interest from enterprise partners that are wanting to come white label and plug in to Tild. And each one of those requires a custom integration. And so for us, if we were building out the team internally, there's a limit to the amount of those integrations that we could handle all at once. Whereas if you're partnering with, one or more third-party groups, it really gives you the ability to scale up that capacity as needed. And so if I go sign 4 or 5 partners all at once, realistically, my team's not able to handle all of those integrations at once. But by bringing on third-party capacity, it allows me to solve for the business. Great challenge, but I signed up too many customers all at once. How do I actually fulfill on those obligations?
When working with IT outsourced teams, what are the most efficient way to ensure alignment with the company's vision and goals?
I think for me, 2 of the big keys come down to how you manage the product and the QA side of things. And so from a product perspective, having strong product owners and product managers that understand the vision for where you're wanting to build, are defining the appropriate requirements and stories and tickets for the build, you're starting from a strong foundation. And so that gets you set on the right path to build out, and then having the appropriate automated and manual testing in place from a QA perspective ensures that the quality of what's being developed is up to the standard that you expect.
As we wrap up our conversation, what advice would you give to companies considering IT outsourcing but concerned about losing control over their technology projects?
The concerns are likely coming from non-technical founders that aren't sure where to start and aren't sure how to manage the process. And I think if you can bring someone onto your team that's a key stakeholder, probably on the product side, that can really help manage and translate your vision as a non-technical founder to the third-party developers, I think your chances of success are infinitely higher. Otherwise, you're kind of using hope as a strategy, which is never a particularly good thing to do in business.
Caleb, thanks very much for joining me today. Amazing podcast, interesting answers. I'm sure that will be amazing and useful for my auditor.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on the show today.
If you enjoy our discussion and want to stay updated on the future episodes, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you will not miss out the latest insights and conversations from the Devico Breakfast Bar. See you in the next episode.